Greetings, good evening. My name is Jessica Robinson. I work with the Cleveland Heights Library System as an adult services librarian. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Okay. Yeah, so we have a wonderful lineup of local history programs that are going on in this spring. In a minute or two, I'm going to send, we have two others that are still going to be happening in the future. And I'm going to put the information and the Zoom link for those down there. We have a wonderful program that's going to be about researching the history of your home from the Cleveland Restoration Society. And also, we are going to have a wonderful presentation with Maisie Adams about the history of Cleveland Heights. So hopefully you will all consider attending those programs as well. We are recording our programs this spring, and all of them are on the Cleveland Heights Historical YouTube channel. My email, if anyone has any questions or if you want to link to any of that, my email is localhistory@heightslibrary.org. And I'll also put that in the chat box in just a second. Okay, so just a couple of things of housekeeping. We are recording this, so we ask just like that you keep your microphones and your video off unless you are asking a question. There will be time at the end for a question and answer session. So if questions occur to you, please send them to us in the chat, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. All right, let me get started introducing our presenters. Tonight we have with us BreAnna Kirk. She is the planning technician at the City of Cleveland Heights. BreAnna Kirk is a planning technician with the City of Cleveland Heights, where she works with the Architectural Board of Review and Landmark Commission. She has been with the city since November 2020 and earned her Bachelor of Science in City and Regional Planning from Ohio State University last spring. We also have with us tonight Heather Rudge. Heather Rudge is the owner and president of Historic Preservation Group, LLC. Prior to establishing HP Group in 2014, she started and ran the Historic Preservation Study at Weber Murphy Fox in Cleveland for 3 years and was a Historic Preservation Specialist with Sandvik Architects for 8 years, writing historic tax credit applications and National Register nominations and monitoring construction on historic tax credit rehabilitation projects. Heather worked for the Cleveland Restoration Society for more than 10 years, where she established and ran their Heritage Home Loan and Sacred Landmark programs. Before moving to Cleveland, she worked in preservation at the New Jersey and Vermont Historic Preservation Office. She is a certified historic real estate development finance professional and has an MS in historic preservation from the University of Vermont and a BA in interior design from Michigan State University. We are very grateful to have both of them here tonight, and I am going to turn the presentation over to BreAnna.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Okay, we will start with some context, some development and early uses. Then we'll get into future plans and Stadium Square after 1930. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with Stadium Square, but let's see if I can get my laser pointer to work. It's right where the star is. It's located near Kane Park along South Taylor Road and Superior Park Drive. It's about 7 acres, and there are 3 commercial buildings along Taylor Road, 2 apartment buildings on Superior Park Drive, and then 19 houses. And most of the buildings are in the Tudor Revival architecture style. And before we jump into the construction and development, it might be helpful to set the scene for the early 20th century in the Cleveland area. The increasing popularity of streetcars and personal cars made it easier for people to travel to and from Cleveland Heights. And that led to massive population growth. And with the population growth came commercial districts. So that brings us to the development of Stadium Square. And that really starts with Benjamin D. Roseman, who was the brain behind the district. Roseman was a Hungarian immigrant and came to the Cleveland area in about 1900. He actually operated a coffee company called the B.D. Roseman Coffee Company for about 11 years. but he shifted his focus to development and construction in 1921 when he bought 8 acres of land, anticipating development to move east to the Stadium Square district, which it eventually did, and it became the fastest growing area of Cleveland Heights in about the 1920s. And at the time, a lot of the development that was happening in Cleveland Heights were rows and rows of apartment buildings, which we can still see today. But Roseman wanted something more unique and special, so he would have all of the buildings unified by a common architecture style known as Tudor Revival. The Tudor Revival style is seen all throughout the city, but it's easily identifiable by the half timbering and the high peaked roofs. It's actually based on a variety of English styles, and for me, someone who's not trained in architecture, it's always been one of the most easily identifiable architecture styles because it's pretty unique. So development started on Superior Park Drive with 10 single-family homes in 1926. The homes were designed by Brook and Burroughs architecture firm, and they were popular for the location, the quality, and the price. After the initial 10, there were 4 more that were built later that were between 1927 and 1931, and then the remaining 5 houses were built between 1937 and 1952. And those 9 houses that were built after the initial 10, they were still in the Tudor Revival style, but they were a more simplified version of the style.
Hey, BreAnna, I
Yes.
saw a question pop up.
Sure.
Do you know why it was called the Monroe Subdivision? That was from a minute or two ago.
I do not. I can look into that though.
Okay. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, do you both probably have like a contact like information too, right?
Yes, I have my contact information in the last slide.
Okay, great. Alrighty, thank you. I'll let you get going again. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Feel free if there's more questions.
Okay, thank you.
So while the homes were being constructed, Roseman started planning 5 more projects that were consisting of commercial buildings and apartment buildings. And the first commercial building constructed was the Taylor Superior Building, located at the northwest corner of Superior Park Drive with this orange little rectangle. It is a 3-story building with 9 storefronts on the ground level and 16 apartments. The second building sits at the southwest corner, outlined in gray, and it's really a mirror image of the Taylor Superior Building. It has the same architect, and it's 3 stories with, again, 9 storefronts and 16 apartments. And Roseman wanted to start out with these grand commercial buildings on either side of Superior Park Drive to create a gateway to the district. The final commercial building, outlined in green up here, abuts the first building. And today they look like one, but this was again designed by Max Weiss. And it's really just a shorter version of the other 2 buildings. There are 6 storefronts and 12 apartments. And at the same time, apartment buildings were being constructed, and this was to serve as a land use buffer between the mixed use development with the commercial and the residential to now multifamily before the single family homes. And this building had 42 units, has 42 units. The apartments were advertised to have iceless refrigeration, all tile baths, and soundproofing. The Morley Hall and Essex Hall apartments were next, and although it's one U-shaped building, the different entrances have different names. So the west entrance block was known as the Morley Hall Apartments, and the east entrance block was known as the Essex Hall Apartments. And this building has a few more units at 55. So with all of that, you haven't heard the mention of Stadium Square. So we will get to that. Early in the construction process, newspapers were calling this area things like the Taylor Road section of Cleveland Heights. And Benjamin Roseman wanted something more catchy and marketable than that. And lucky for him, there was a proposed park stadium that was happening right next to his development. So the growing popularity of sports in the time led to stadiums popping up everywhere. And Cleveland Heights residents wanted their own. And a lot of people thought that the natural topography of the park would be a great place for a stadium. The idea was first proposed by the Kiwanis Club in 1927, and it was designed to fit between 12,000 and 14,000 people. It was put on the ballot as a bond issue, and it lost. So the Kiwanis Club kept trying to spark interest in the stadium and put it on the ballot again the following year, but it failed, and they ended up abandoning the idea in 1928. But Roseman's development was still known as Stadium Square. In 1930, the Cleveland City Directory listed 18 commercial spaces, with 17 occupied and 1 vacant. And a lot of merchants use more than one storefront, so that's why the numbers don't exactly add up if you go back to the other slides that listed the total number of storefronts. But a lot of the stores were focused on providing goods and services that would be used by residents in the immediate area, known as neighborhood retail. So you had things like grocery stores and meat markets, 3 of them, a bakery, shoe repair, a beauty shop, a dry cleaner, and real estate. Really, a lot of things that people would need in their day-to-day lives were all available in the square. According to the 1930 census, most of the residents of the single-family homes owned their homes, and they were generally married couples in their 30s to 50s with 2 to 3 children. The median home value was $20,000, and the rent ranged from $100 to $170 a month for the couple of houses that were not owner-occupied. A lot of the residents were born in the United States, but some of them were European-born. The men typically held white-collar management jobs, and none of the wives worked. And compared to the rest of the city, the homes cost more, and the rent was more too, but you have to take into consideration that these were single-family homes and not just apartment buildings. The apartment renters, on the other hand, were generally younger married couples in their 20s to 30s, and about half of them had 1 child. Oh, this slide is incorrect. The rent was actually $45 to $90 a month, and that's a lot closer to the $77 a month average. And the same with the homeowners. A lot of the residents were born in the United States, with some coming from Europe. And the men in these households worked in sales or retail, and some of the wives worked too in positions like a hairdresser or a teacher. So with the success of the initial development, Roseman had big plans to continue his development. But unfortunately, the plans never happened because of the Great Depression. He planned to expand north of the Taylor Block with more mixed-use buildings in an apartment building, and east with another mixed-use building. Max Weiss was preparing the designs for the mixed-use building that would have gone about here, as well as the 22-suite apartment building adjacent to that would have gone over here. And then on the east side of Taylor, there would have been another mixed-use building with a movie theater, more storefronts and apartments, a large parking garage, and a service station. And I think the parking garage actually was built, but it's been torn down since. The 1947 directory showed that 15 out of 18 homes were still owner-occupied in 1947, and about 98% of the apartment units were rented. And the business profiles were very similar to the 1930 profiles, with only a couple of changes, like only having 2 grocery stores or 2 meat markets instead of 3, and there were now 2 dry cleaners and a bar. The Stadium Square district and the surrounding neighborhoods really look the same as they did in the 1920s and 30s. There haven't been much changes to the buildings themselves. And the houses in the apartment buildings on Superior Park Drive continue to be occupied, though the mixed-use buildings on Taylor don't have as many retail or apartment tenants, and the building on the southwest corner is vacant and owned by the city. But the rich history of Stadium Square landed it a place on the National Register of Historic Places a year and a day ago today. We were very close to that 1-year anniversary. It was listed under criteria A for having a significant contribution to the history, and criteria C for the architecture. And although a lot of the commercial spaces are vacant right now, the national landmark status is promising, and there's a lot of opportunities that come along with that, which Heather will speak on more. But that is all I had for the history. Are there any questions, Jessica?
So we had a couple of comments. So there was one comment that says this was the last building next to Heights Furniture and Toys. I'm sorry, I didn't see that one come through. That was a comment. And then there was a comment about my wife's grandfather built it, Ben Roseman. And then there is a question that says, we lived in the house right next to the apartments. Ours was a 2-family home. I wonder if it was originally built that way. I don't know if you need any more information to answer that question.
I can answer that. It was built that way. It was one of the later houses, and it was the only double on the street.
Yeah, and then I also have a question that says, is Taylor Road Synagogue still there? I haven't lived in Cleveland in a long time, but lived on Superior Park Drive as a kid.
I'm assuming that's the synagogue right adjacent to Stadium Square. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, that's still there.
Yeah, they actually have an entrance to their parking lot off of Superior Park Drive. So.
Yeah, I actually asked that question. Taylor Road Synagogue is between Kane Park and all the buildings on Superior Park Drive. Some of the apartments and that 2-family house back up to the synagogue. But I was wondering if it was still the synagogue.
It is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I misunderstood one of the comments. It says, no, it was a question. Does Stadium Square go up to where Heights Furniture was? And I don't know if you're familiar with that, with Heights Furniture or not.
I am not. Heather, are you? I can pull up the map again if that would be helpful. I think this is the synagogue over here.
On Taylor Road, there was a gas station at Blanche, then Heights Furniture, and then these Tudor buildings. I'm trying to determine if those Tudor buildings are Stadium Square or were there other Tudor buildings before that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's a couple more comments I could read, and then we can go on to Heather's portion. Says, I read the developer had a private bus service to bring people to and from the businesses since it was not on a streetcar line. And then
that is accurate and true. He was definitely an entrepreneur and a salesman. So yes, there was bus service and some car service to this location for the shopping.
There's also, oh, I'm sorry.
The family legend, I married into the Roseman family, is they always said that he could have bought Cedar Center where it is now, and he did because it was too far out. That's just something of interest.
So is the pink on the map labeled 1892 and 1890 part of Stadium Square? Because that's where Heights Furniture would have been.
Oh, that is outside the boundary of his.
Yeah, it's just where the blue is overlaid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I also see a question that says, were any of the homes on South Compton part of the development? Or any of the homes, sorry.
No, it stops at that corner property. That, and we selected the boundaries because this was the allotment that the the developer started with, and it's, you know, it's held together all this time. So the subdivision was as you see it here historically.
Mhm.
And
Hopefully I'm not missing any. There was one last one that says, why is it called Stadium Square? Is it because of the stadium development? Well, I'm sorry, I'm adding that. The question just says, why is it called Stadium Square? I'm getting more questions. So I don't know if you guys want me to, if you want to go on to Heather's portion and then answer the rest at the end, or if you want to just keep answering questions right now.
that's fine to answer sort of all the history questions that everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, why is it called Stadium Square?
That was because of the proposed stadium. That is what is in now Kane Park. The stadium never happened, but at the time the development was happening, it was proposed and being talked about. And it was a more marketable name than the Taylor Road area of Cleveland Heights.
Yeah. And then I see one that says, was Kane Park there before Stadium Square?
Heather, you might be able to elaborate on this, but I know it was a park, but it was not called Kane Park.
Correct, but I cannot remember the name of it.
Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, I don't know, Heather, if you want to. I do see one comment that says there was a two-family house between 1892 and 1908. Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, I think that's the end of the historical questions. We can always ask some more at the end too, but I'll put myself on mute and let Heather talk more about the tax incentives, right?
Yeah, BreAnna, can you just run my slides?
Yes,
Yeah,
and let me see if
control.
I can get rid of this laser pointer. Oh.
Okay.
Why does it keep doing that?
Okay, I don't know if we have any commercial property owners on this presentation. So I'm going to just talk briefly about federal and state tax credits. One of the reasons that Stadium Square, the city desired to have Stadium Square listed, was to make the redevelopment and preservation and historic rehabilitation of the commercial buildings in the district more attractive to potential developers. When a commercial property is listed in the register and is income producing, so it's a mixed use commercial residential rental, like the apartment buildings behind the commercial buildings. And sometimes some properties occupied by nonprofits, but if a building is income producing, if it's in a historic district and it's a contributing building in the historic district, which all of the commercial properties in Stadium Square are contributing, listing a district makes those properties eligible to apply and potentially receive federal and state historic tax credits. For listing in the National Register to go for federal credits, the property has to be listed by the time a rehabilitation project is complete. And if one is applying for state credits, the property must be listed in the National Register before an application is submitted. For state credits, local landmarking can also make a property eligible to apply for state tax credits. So if you have an individual property that's not in a district, but your Cleveland Heights Landmarks Commission deems it historic and lists it that way, that property is also could be eligible for state tax credits. Next slide. So this is a map that is actually on the city's website, and I don't know how many of you have seen this, but this identifies the historic districts that are currently in Cleveland Heights. Stadium Square is the teeny little pink one in the middle, right by where it says Kane Park, just to the the right of the blue box over East Overlook Road. And not all of these are commercial districts, but there are apartment buildings in these districts. There are some mixed-use buildings. There are straight commercial buildings. And if they retain any of their historic character, they're likely eligible for federal and state historic tax credits. Next slide, please. So just briefly, I don't want everybody to fall asleep, because if you don't own a commercial, income producing property, this doesn't apply to you. But just briefly, federal historic tax credit is 20% with no cap, and the tax credit is calculated on the cost of the rehab. So if you had a commercial building and you spent $1 million doing a rehabilitation, 200,000 of that would be a tax credit at the end of the project. And that is a tax credit against taxes owed. So if you are a building owner or a developer with a historic building, you can literally deduct the credits off of your taxes owed. And that is carried forward for 5 years. So for smaller projects, it can make a lot of sense for a building owner to do a historic tax credit project if they're going to do work on the building, because you save on your taxes with the feds. The qualified rehabilitation expenditures, or QREs, that's what the tax credit is calculated on. QREs are sort of everything in and fastened to the building, but it's not acquisition, site work, financing, or any like furniture. It has to be attached to the building. On a federal credit, applications can be made at any time, and they're reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office in Columbus and approved by the National Park Service. And again, this is a credit against taxes owed. Just as an example, a local company, Sherwin-Williams, they have a whole tax credit department. They buy millions of dollars of tax credits every year from projects around the country. They buy some locally. And if they owe $100 million in taxes and they buy 50 million in tax credits, they only have to write the government a check for 50 million. So it's an excellent program that gets investment into some of the projects. So if a tax credit is sold to a company like Sherwin-Williams, they actually, in exchange for the tax credit, put cash into the project for the cost of the rehab. So let's go to the next slide, please. The state historic tax credit is 25% of the qualified rehabilitation expenditures up to a cap of 5 million. The QREs are the same as the federal credit. Unlike the feds, where you can apply anytime, in Ohio, there's 2 application deadlines, March 31st and September 30th. Again, this application is reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office. It's basically part of the same federal app, but then there's another part of the application that is scored and approved by Ohio Development Services Agency, and they're the ones who actually award the credits. Unlike the federal apps, the state applications are scored and they're competitively awarded. So we just had a round submitted, and they will probably give away about $30 million in allocation, and there were $86 million was requested. So it's a program that's very popular, but the competition is pretty significant in getting an allocation. Some of the scoring in the state application, the federal application is about the historic building. The state application is about economic development. So they look at where the project is located and how many other awards they've gotten in that, city and county. They look at vacancy. So for instance, the building in Stadium Square, the commercial building that the city owns that is vacant would score very high because it's 100% vacant. They look at the size of the project, that the financing is in place, public participation and support, and then what the new taxes and income generated from the project would be. And again, this is it's a credit against taxes owed, but it can also be taken as a refund. For instance, I did a project with Lakewood Historical Society. They were gifted a building, which we got listed, so they could apply for state credits. And it was about $100,000 rehab, and they got the state actually wrote them a check for about $22,000 on for their federal or their state tax credit refund. So it's it doesn't have to be a big project to be funded. So that's the tax credit information very quickly. I don't want to go too deep because I don't think it applies to that many people that are on the Zoom. But if you go to my next slide, my contact information is there. If anybody has any questions, if you're curious if a building you own or are interested in would be eligible for tax credits, we go out and look at buildings all the time. We can look at them also online and tell you pretty quickly if it's not in a district, if it's not a contributing building in a district, if it's not listed individually, we can look at a building pretty quickly and tell you if it would be eligible to be listed in the National Register, and then obviously access to federal and state tax credits. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, I did see a question that says, what is the benefit to the residents on Superior Park to this designation?
A National Register nomination and listing is, in most cases, it's honorific. So it goes, the nomination and all the research and history goes through a very extensive vetting process, both at the state and the National Park Service. And it is, the Stadium Square Historic District is now on a list at the national level that says this is an important neighborhood, both architecturally and in sort of the community planning areas. While it doesn't have national significance, most districts and properties have local significance. Sometimes they have local and state significance. And then there's some properties that have national significance, but it's an honorific listing, and it's been shown there's many research studies that show that property values in listed historic districts maintain much better than houses that are not in districts. So it can provide some economic benefit potentially when properties are sold, but it's really just an honor to be listed in the National Register. And the city of Cleveland Heights may decide that they want to put signs up that show that people are entering a historic district. So it can be just a real nice point of pride, and something that brings the district and the surrounding community together.
Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions or for our presenters tonight? I see some comments. There's a comment that just says, I found the discussion on the tax credits interesting. That was my niche when I was working as a CPA.
Ah. Yes, well, every tax credit project definitely needs a CPA that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm going to put the information for the upcoming programs down in the chat again in case anyone missed them. Oh, let's see another message. What are the plans for the retail buildings going forward?
Well, I know the one that the city owns, the goal is to rehabilitate that and redevelop that, but the other two, it's sort of unknown at this point. I know they went to sheriff's auction and there were not any bids. So it depends on if anyone bids and owns that privately or if it goes to the city. But ultimately, rehabbing and redeveloping is the main goal.
Hopefully using historic tax credits to do so.
Yes.
Let's see what else, because I saw a couple of other things. The meetings are going to be posted on the Cleveland Heights Historical YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and you look for Cleveland Heights Historical, it's run by the city and of Cleveland Heights, and the all of the recorded meetings are going up there. Yeah, I see the biggest challenge to the mixed-use buildings is they lack parking. Too bad the parking garage that's been across the street was torn down. Oh, there's one that says the buildings on Taylor, the city owns, that has gone in and out of foreclosure. Why is the city holding on to it, but it remains vacant?
I can't speak to that fully because I'm not in the economic development department. But I know that the city was wondering if they were eventually going to acquire the other two buildings. So maybe they were waiting to get all three before moving forward with one.
I can just add to that. I think that when we started doing the district, then I don't know if any of you knew Kara O'Donnell, who was at the city. That is, that was their intent then, that they were going to try to secure all the buildings and then hopefully package it as one redevelopment. But, like BreAnna said, we don't know what the status is right now of the other two buildings.
Okay, and I see a comment that says, I hope they redevelop. I really enjoyed living on Superior Park Drive when I was a kid.
It's a charming street. It's just you don't even realize it's there almost because of you have that gateway of the commercial buildings and you just drive back in there. It's charming as can be.
All right. Superior Park is a great street, wonderful people, wonderful neighbors, well taken care of properties. Yeah, it's a really nice area. We spent hours in Kane Park in the 1960s when it was safe for us to be there by ourselves. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, okay. I see a lot of just kind of comments and thank yous to the presenters. Thank you very much for this presentation. This was really educational and informative. I'm just so grateful to all the presenters for the spring programs. It's been really wonderful learning more just about the local community and all the buildings.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if the National Register nomination, it's a public document, so if anybody's interested in receiving it, BreAnna, you I think have it, or we can file it to anybody who wants it. So just ask if you would like to read the whole thing.
Yes, I have that. I can put my contact information back up if it will let me.
I guess, Jessica, you might even be
go.
able to post it on I don't know if you can post it on the library website as well. So.
Yeah, sorry, just sending another message about the Cleveland Heights Historical YouTube channel. I don't know how many people know about that, but it's a really lovely, service run by the city. Like basically I'll just send the file over to them and they'll put it up. So that should be up in a couple of days. All righty. Well, thank you both for the presentation. Really
Thank you. Thank
appreciate
you for the opportunity. I'm happy to be a part of this.
it. Wonderful. All right. Well, everyone have a nice evening. Thank you so much for coming to the program.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.